This is Ben Lima with Labor Exploitation and Corporate Neglect. For my thesis statement, corporations face little considerable opposition to unethical practices and require harsher consequences to discourage future malpractice. For slide 1, the motivations behind neglectful practices. Corporations face constant pressure to maximize profits and stay competitive, which can push them to cut costs in ways that harm workers. Weak enforcement and information gaps make it easier to get away with these practices, while short-term incentives reward quick gains over long-term responsibility. Combined, this leads to corporations testing how far they can go for profit while avoiding accountability. Slide 2. Limited enforcement of laws and loopholes. Even when laws exist, enforcement is often limited and full of loopholes. Penalties are frequently too small compared to the profits gained, while underfunded agencies and outdated regulations struggle to keep up with modern business practices. On top of that, long legal processes delay the consequences companies might receive, reducing their effectiveness as deterrent. Case examples. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill at the British Petroleum. There were safety shortcuts that contributed to an explosion and massive environmental damage. Volkswagen emissions scandal installed software to cheat emissions tests and mislead regulators. The Wells Fargo fake account scandal. Employees created millions of unauthorized accounts under pressure to meet sales goals. Opioid crisis with Johnson & Johnson downplayed addiction risks while promoting opioid sales. Bhopal disaster with the Union Carbide. Poor safety systems led to toxic gas leaks and thousands of deaths. Consequences of continued malpractice. Continued malpractice leads to serious consequences, including environmental damage, resource depletion, and risks of public health and safety. It also erodes consumer trust, making people less confident in business decisions overall. Over time, it can create unfair markets where unethical companies gain advantages, weakening competition and allowing monopolistic behavior to grow. Strategies for increasing accountability. Accountability can be strengthened by holding executives personally responsible through criminal liability and by increasing fines so that they scale with company revenue. Consumer pressure and ethical investing can also push companies to act responsibly by impacting reputation and profits. Finally, faster legal processes and stronger enforcement will ensure that consequences are imposed within a reasonable time and that they can actually deter misconduct. For counter-arguments, some argue that stricter regulations could harm economic growth and make it harder for companies to compete globally. They also claim that reputational damage already discourages misconduct and that existing laws are sufficient if properly enforced. From this perspective, the issue isn't a lack of rules, but how effectively they're applied. While overregulation can have downsides, the evidence shows that current penalties often fail to outweigh the profits gained from misconduct, meaning reputational damage alone isn't enough. Global competition shouldn't justify lowering standards, but rather encourage consistent enforcement across the global market. For my conclusion, labor exploitation and corporate neglect don't persist because they're hidden. Instead, they persist because the consequences aren't enough to stop them. As we've seen, many corporations weigh the cost of harming workers against the cost of penalties, and too often harming workers and possibly larger populations is cheaper. That is all. I hope you enjoyed.